Oh, sorry, I'm live. Hello. So it's been a while, and this is going to be a short one too. So it's been a while because I had an operation that went fine. Um, so basically, I have muscular pain in the lower back of my body, and they are testing to check if they cannot put like electroshock somewhere in my muscle so it calms down a little. And they were trying to find the nerve, the specific nerve that's on my spine, um, and send it electroshock on it to help it relax, because I cannot relax my own muscle by myself, it seems. And I need help relaxing, which is not a surprise. So I had this operation, but they didn't find the nerve. So they were basically playing with a needle in my back for like 10, 15 minutes and trying to find a nerve, and like just sending shocks and like being, where did you feel that? So I felt that in my arm, or I felt that like somewhere else in my body, and they never got the nerve they were searching for. So it wasn't the worst operation I had. It was not fun. Like, I'm not gonna say it was fun, but I had worse, you know. So so this is going to be a short episode, partly because of that, partly because my head hurts. But I still wanted to do an episode because it's been a while. And like, I've had this operation. I need to go to Quebec next week because there's a death in the family. And like, it's been a mess. It's been a mess. And turns out reading to the Lighthouse is not my priority. Surprise, surprise. I also need to develop a game still and work 40 hours a week. So those were my priorities. But I still want to do a video where I read, because it's important that I finish what I started. And it's important for you that I'm there, I hope. I'm so happy to do it. I just didn't have the time. Also, I've been playing a lot of D&D. I have a game as a GM, and I have a game as a player, and that's a lot of work. But I do that like all the time. When I was a teenager, I was basically during the summer we were basically playing D&D like 6 days a week. Not only D&D, other role-playing game, but mostly like World of Darkness stuff. I love that stuff. It just takes like a lot of prepping, especially when you're the GM, but I still love that stuff. If it could be my own life, my whole life, it would. That and, watching movies and reading books. Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah, we'll talk now, but I'm going to start reading. Again, it's going to be a short one because I don't have much time. And my head hurt a little. We were at part 7 of the first chapter, so yeah, we're just going to do about 10 pages, 2-part. But I'll come back and we'll talk a little in between both parts. Okay, let's start at part 7. But his son hated him. He hated him for coming up to them, for stopping and looking down on them. He hated him for interrupting them. He hated him for the exaltation and sublimity of his gestures, for the magnificence of his head, for his exactingness and egotism, for there he stood commanding them to attend to him. But most of all, he hated the twang and twitter of his father's emotion, which we all hate Twitter, vibrating round them, disturbed the perfect simplicity and good sense of his relation with his mother. By looking fixedly at the page, he hoped to make him move on. By pointing his finger at a word, he hoped to recall his mother's attention, which he knew angrily wavered wavered. Instantly his father stopped. But no, nothing would make Mr. Ramsay move on. There he stood, demanding sympathy. Mrs. Ramsay, who had been sitting loosely, folding her son in her arm, braced herself, and half turning, seemed to raise herself with an effort, and at once to pour erect into the air a rain of energy, a column of spray, looking at the same time animated and alive as if all her energies were being fused into force, burning and illuminating quietly. Thus she sat, taking up her stocking again, and into this delicious fecundity, this fontaine and spray of life, the fatal sterility of the male plunged itself like a beak of brass, barren and bare. He wanted sympathy. He was a failure, he said. Mrs. Ramsay flushed her needles. Mr. Ramsay repeated, never taking his eyes from her face, that he was a failure. She blew the word back at him. Charles Stanley, she said. But he must have more than that. It was sympathy he wanted, to be assured of his genius, first of all, and then to be taken within the circle of life, warmed and soothed, to have his senses restored to him, his barrenness made fertile, and all the rooms of the house made full of life. The drawing room, behind the drawing room, the kitchen, above the kitchen, the bedrooms, and beyond them, the nurseries. They must be furnished, they must be filled with life. Sorry, every time I start that book again, I remember how hard it is to read, like out loud. Yeah. And this reminded me of stuff that happened during this weekend, but it's personal stuff that is not like I'm open with you. All my personal stuff is fair game. I'm going to talk on YouTube about it, but if it touches one of my friends or a relationship, I'm not going to say because, they deserve to not be exposed on YouTube like I am. Okay. Charles Stanley thought him the greatest metaphysician of the time, she said, but he must have more than that. He must have sympathy. He must be assured that he too lived in the heart of life, was needed, not here only, but all over the world. Flashing her needles, confident, upright, she created drawing room and kitchen, set them all aglow, bade him take his ease there, go in and out, enjoy himself. She laughed, she knitted. Standing between her knees, very stiff, James felt all her strength flaring up to be drunk and quenched by the beak of brass, the red scimitar of the male, which moved mercilessly again and again, demanding sympathy. Dudes asking, like fragile masculinity, just here. It was a failure, he repeated. What the fuck, man? Well, look then, feel then, flashing her needles, glancing around about her, out of the window, into the room at James himself, she assured him, beyond a shadow of a doubt, by her laugh, her poise, her competence as a nurse carrying a light across a dark room, assured a fractious child that it was real, the house was full, the garden blowing. If he put implicit faith in her, nothing should hurt him. However deep he buried himself or climbed high, not for a second should he find himself without her. So boasting of her capacity to surround and protect, there was scarcely a shell of herself left for her to know herself by. All was so lavished and spent, and James, as he stood stiff between her knees, felt her rise in a rosy-floored fruit tree laid with leaves and dancing buds, into which the beak of brass, the arithmeter of his father, the egotistical man, plunged and smote, demanding sympathy. Filled with her words, like a child with drops of satisfied, he said at last, looking at her with humble gratitude restored, renewed, that he would take a turn. He would watch the children playing cricket. He went. Immediately, Mrs. Ramsay seemed to fold herself together. One petal closed in another, and the whole fabric fell in exhaustion upon itself, so that she had only strength enough to move her finger in exquisite abandonment to exhaustion across the page of Grimm's fairy story. while they are threaded through her like the pulse in a spring which has expanded to its full width and now gently ceased to beat, the rapture of successful creation. Every throb of this pulse seemed, as he walked away, to unclose her and her husband, and to give to each that solace which two different notes, one high, one low, struck together, seemed to give each other as they combined. Yet, as the resonance died and she turned to the fairy tales again, Mrs. Ramsay felt not only exhausted in body, afterward, afterwards, not a time she always felt this, but also their tinge of physical fatigue, some faintly disagreeable sensation with another origin. Now that she read aloud the story of the fisherman's wife, she knew precisely where it came from, nor did she let herself put into words her dissatisfaction when she realized at the turn of the page, when she stopped and heard dully, ominously, a wave fall. Oh, it came from this. She did not like, even for a second, to feel finer than her husband, and further could not bear not being entirely sure when she spoke to him of the truth of what she said. Universities and people wanting him, lectures and books, and their being of the highest importance, all that she did not doubt for a moment, but was their relation and his coming to her like that, openly, so that anyone could see, that discomposed her, for then people said he depended on her. One day must know that of the two he was infinitely the more important, and what she gave the world, in comparison with what he gave, negligible. But then again, it was the other thing too, not being able to tell him the truth, being afraid, for instance, about the greenhouse roof and the expense it would be, £50 perhaps, to mend it, and then about his books, to be afraid that he might guess what she a little suspected, that his last book was not quite his best book. She gathered that from William Banks, and then to hide small daily things and the children seeing it and the burden it laid on them. All this diminished the entire joy, the pure joy of the two notes sounding together, and let the song die on her ear, now with a dismal flatness. A shadow was on the page. She looked up. It was Augustus Carmichael shuffling past precisely now, at the very moment when it was painful to be reminded of the inadequacy of human relationships, that the most perfect was flawed and could not bear the examination which, loving her husband with her instinct for truth, she turned upon it, when it was painful to feel herself convicted of unworthiness and impeded in her proper function by these lies, these exaggeration. It was at this moment, when she was fretted thus ignobly in the wake of her exaltation, that Mr. Carmichael shuffled past in his yellow slippers, and some demon in her made it necessary for her to call out as he passed. Sorry. Going indoors, Mr. Carmichael. That was part 7, where a man seems to lead, I don't know, where she tries to recomfort her man, but he's an asshole and he doesn't understand. So, a few things happened in the last 2 weeks. I don't know if you follow like cinema, but I'm very happy that the movie that won the Cannes Film Festival was Titan by Julie Ducournau. It's the second time a woman won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival after Jane Campion. Is it The Piano? I think. Which is a beautiful film, even if I'm not even sure of the title. But it was just Campion that won, the first woman to win the Palme d'Or. A few reasons why. Like, I know, a film should be recompensed because it was the most interesting, or, well, film festivals are weird. Like, it's not necessarily the best film. It's the film it depends on the jury, it depends on what's the mood of the jury, it depends. Sometimes it's cool to give the award to a film that is less known, from a director that is less known, or something, as a push, like Tim Burton did. Well, he gave the Palme d'Or when he was head of the jury. He gave the Palme d'Or to Uncle Boonmee from Ma Pichette Panquer Acetical, which is a beautiful film, but like a film that people didn't expect to win the Palme d'Or, and when it won, it gave that movie a lot more clout internationally, and made the movie available way. It made the movie easily available worldwide, because it would be distributed, because it won the Palme d'Or, which would not have happened the same way if it didn't win. So even that, like, it's kind of stupid that Julie Ducournau is only the second woman to win the Palme d'Or. I think a few years ago, like, it was Ken Loach that won, and he was against Tony Erdmann from Mare Ade, sorry, and like, that was a stupid choice. The Ken Loach movie, it's not bad, but like, it's very a typical Ken Loach movie. It's very typical social movie, and like, like last year, 2 years ago, sorry, it was Parasite that won, and the favorite was Portrait de la jeune fille en feu, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And again, like, Parasite's fine. Like, it's a good movie, but it's not Portrait. And I mean, I haven't seen all the movies of that selection, but I've seen those two, and like, Parasite is a good thriller with like a slight social commentary, but it's very small. Like, it's a fun thriller. One of the reasons why it also won the Oscar for the best movie is it's actually a very accessible movie, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying because it's accessible is worse, but like, it's kind of a typical twisted thriller. Like, it could have been an American film, and it would have been the same thing. Well, maybe not. That's a little, no, I shouldn't have said that, but still, like, for me, it just doesn't compare with Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And again, I haven't seen all the movie that won prize and all the movie of the competition, but obviously I think Portrait is a better film and a more deserving film. Like, I was thinking Tony Erdmann is a more deserving film than the Ken Loach I won this year. And like, I don't know, I haven't seen all the movie every years, but obviously, like, the jury is the jury, and sometimes they make a good choice that you agree with, sometimes they make a bad choice that you agree with. But like, I feel the quality of the movie that were put out by woman director in the last few decades. Well, in the last, like, it's easy. History has a tendency to not see women's work as deserving, and not women's subject as deserving of praise. And I kind of find it like very obvious when you look at top 100 movies. They shoot pictures, or the timestamp of 100, or IMDb's 100 and 250 best picture and whatever. And like, obviously there's less movie directed by women than men, because sexism makes it harder for a woman to direct a movie than to get the fun to direct a movie than for a man. But like, even then, there's a few masterpieces that were directed by women that don't have, I think on They Were Picture, the movie Jeanne Dittman by Chantal Ackerman is like 95 or 96, like it changes every year, and it's the only movie in the top 100 directed by a woman. And that movie, like, I'm obviously not the the authority for whole cinema, but that movie should be seen in the same should be seen at the same level and in the same breath as something like Vertigo from Hitchcock or Citizen Kane. Like, for me, it's a top 10, and obviously the top 10 movies are incredible, but it's crazy that there would only be one movie deserving of the top 100 directed by a woman, and it's not the case. But like, the story makes those films harder to find, so there's less critics that are gonna name them for the top, so they're not gonna end up as much there. And so, coming back to Ken, I find it obviously the solution is not to always give the Palme d'Or to a movie directed by a woman, even if it's bad or if it's good, but there's a lot of work to do, and let's say for a few years, maybe we should encourage at least a more diverse selection. At least a more diverse selection. And I'm also happy because Stan, like, it's not an easy choice, like compared to Parasite, which was, I think, a choice that a lot of people liked. So it was kind of the choice everybody thought about, except Portrait de la jeune fille en feu again. Like, Titan is an horror movie directed by a woman that's supposed to be weird. A lot of people hate that movie. A lot of people love it. It's a bold movie, and it's a bold choice for Palme d'Or, like Uncle Bunny was. And I think those Palme d'Or are probably more interesting at the end of the day because they give attention to a movie that wouldn't get it otherwise. Though, so Julie Ducournau, it's her second film, and she directed a movie called Raw that got a good word of mouth around the world, and I think it's pretty good. So, like, it's not, Raw is not a masterpiece, and probably Titan won't be. Maybe it is, but like, it's a movie. It's a pretty good movie that shows a lot of promise for a first-time director. So I'm really excited to see Stan. Maybe I'm gonna hate it, but I'm really excited for it, and I think. I haven't seen none of the movies. I think it's a cool Palme d'Or choice, and it's been a while since I looked at the Palme d'Or and was like, I'm excited to see that thing. I'm trying to remember the last few years, but yeah. So that was a little talk about Stan. If you haven't seen Ra, you should see it. It's soon spooky season. It's a perfect film for a movie fan. Some people find it a little shocking, but it's not that disgusting. Like, it's not hostile level of violence or that kind of thing. It's pretty tame in comparison. I know, like, it talks about women's sexuality respectfully, but I hope that it talks about women's sexuality, and I know a lot of women are more affected by how the film is, but it's not extremely gory or anything. It's worth seeing. It's worth seeing. It's part. I should do a list of what I consider my own. What is my kink cinema? So what is, like, not all movie where they film BDSM scene, but I'm very interested in the what is kink cinema, and I think Raw is a movie about a woman who finds what's her kink and what make her ticks, and I think it should be in kink cinema, in the kink cinema canon, also in The Cut by Jane Campion. So that's a link we can do with those two directors. Is a great King cinema movie. That movie was pan at its release, and it shouldn't have been. Again, maybe because it was a movie about women's interests more than men's, and maybe because a lot of critics think the norms are men's point of view and tend to judge things with a male point of view first. But maybe not. Maybe most critics are just don't have great taste. And The Cut is a good movie. You should see that too. He said nothing. He took opium. The children said he had stained his beard yellow with it. Perhaps what was obvious to her was that the poor man was unhappy. Came to them every year as an escape, and yet every year she felt the same thing. He did not trust her. She said, I am going to town. Shall I get you stamps, paper, tobacco? And she felt him wince. He did not trust her. It was his wife's doing. She remembered that inquiry of his wife's towards him, which had made her turn to steal an element there, in the horrid little room in St. John's Wood, when with her own eyes she had seen that odious woman turn him out of the house. He was unkempt. He dropped things on his coat. He had the tiresomeness of an old man with nothing in the world to do. And she turned him out of the room. She said in her odious way, No, Mrs. Ramsay, and I want to have a little talk together. And Mrs. Ramsay could see, as if before her eyes, the innumerable miseries of his life. He had money enough to buy tobacco. Did he have to ask her for it? Half a crown, 18 pence? Oh, she could not bear to think of the little indignity she made him suffer. And always now, why she could not guess except that it came from that woman somehow. He shrank from her. He never told her anything, but what more could she have done? There was a sunny room given up to him. The children were good to him. Never did she show a sign of not wanting him. She went out of her way, indeed, to be friendly. Do you want stamps? Do you want tobacco? Here's a book you might like, and so on. And after all, her hair, insensibly she drew herself together, physically, the sense of her own beauty becoming, as it did to Seldom, present to her. After all, she had not generally any difficulty in making people like her. For instance, George Manning, Mr. Wallace, famous as they were, they would come to her of an evening quietly and talk alone over her fire. She bore about with her, she could not help knowing it, the torch of her beauty. She carried it erect into any room that she entered, and after all, veil it as she might, and shrink from the monotony of bearing that it imposed on her, her beauty was apparent. She had been admired, she had been loved, she had entered rooms where mourners sat. Tears had flown in her presence, men and women too. Letting go the multiplicity of things had hallowed themselves with her, the relief of simplicity. It injured her that he should shrink. It hurt her, and yet not cleanly, not rightly. That was what she minded, coming as it did on top of her discontent with her husband, the sense she had no when Mr. Carmichael shuffled past, just nodding to her question, with a book beneath his arm, in his yellow slipper, that she was suspected, and that all this desire of hers to give, to help, was vanity. For her own self satisfaction, was it that she wished to so instinctively to help, to give, that people might say of her, Oh, Mrs. Ramsay, dear Mrs. Ramsay, Mrs. Ramsay, of course, and neither and send for her and admire her. Was it not secretly that she wanted? And therefore, when Mr. Carmichael shrank away from her, as he did at this moment, making off to some corner where he did acrostics endlessly, she did not feel merely snubbed back in her instinct, but made aware of the pettiness of some part of her, and of human relation, how flawed they are, how despicable, how self-seeking at their best, shabby and worn out, and not presumably. Her cheeks were hollow, her hair was white. Any longer a sight that filled her eyes up with joy. She had better devote her mind to the story of the fisherman and his wife, and so pacify the bundle of sensitiveness. None of her children was as sensitive as he was, her son James. Sorry, I feel for that. I feel the whole anxiety there. The man's heart grew heavy, she read aloud, and he would not go, he said to himself. It is not right, and yet he went. And when he came to the sea, the water was quite purple and dark blue, and grey and thick, and no longer so green and yellow, but it was still quiet, and he stood there and said, Mrs. Ramsay could have wished that her husband had not chosen that moment to stop. Why had he not gone, as he said, to watch the children playing cricket? But he did not speak. He looked, he nodded, he approved, he went on. He slipped, seeing before him that hedge which had over and over again rounded some pose, signified some conclusion, seeing his wife and child, seeing again the herds with the trailing red geraniums which had so often decorated processes of thought and bore written up amongst their leaves as if they were a scrap of paper on which one scribbles notes in the rush of reading. He slipped, saying all this smoothly, into speculation suggested by an article in the Times about the number of Americans who visit Shakespeare's house every year. If Shakespeare had never existed, he asked, would the world have differed so much from what it is today? Does the progress of civilization depend upon great men? This is a very sexist point of view, man, anyway. Is the lot of the average human being better now than in the time of the pharaohs? Is the lot of the average human being, however, he asked himself, the criterion by which we judge the measure of civilization? Possibly not. Possibly the greatest good require the existence of a slave class. Fuck that. The liftman in the tube is an eternal necessity. The thought was distasteful to him. He tossed his head. To avoid it, he would find some way of snubbing the predominance of the heart. He would argue that the world exists for the average human being, that the hearts are merely a decoration imposed on the top of human life. They do not express it. He's a dumbass. Nor is Shakespeare necessary to it. Not knowing precisely why it was that he wanted to disparage Shakespeare and come to the rescue of the man who stands eternally in the door of the lift, he picked a leaf sharply from the edge. All this would have to be dished up for the young man at Cardiff next month, he thought. Here, on his terrace, he was merely foraging and picnicking. He threw away the leaf that he had picked so peevishly. Like a man who reaches from his horse to pick a bunch of roses or stuff his pocket with nuts as he ambles at his ease through the lanes and fields of a country known to him from boyhood. It was all familiar, his turning that stile that cut across the field. Hours he would spend thus with his pipe of an evening, thinking up and down and in and out of the old familiar lanes and commons, which were all struck about with the history of that campaign there, the life of the statesman here, with poems and with anecdotes, with figures too. This tinker, that soldier, all very brisk and clear, but at length the lane, the field, the common, the fruitful nut tree, and the flooring edge led him on to further turn of the road, where he dismounted always, tied his horse to a tree, and proceeded on foot alone. He reached the edge of the lawn and looked out the bay beneath. It was his fate, his peculiarity, whether he wished it or not to come out just on a spit of land which the sea is slowly eating away, and there to stand, like a desolate seabird alone. It was his power, his gift, suddenly to shed all superfluities, to shrink and diminish so that he looked barer and felt sparer. even physically, yet lost none of his intensity of mind, and so to stand on his little ledge facing the dark of human ignorance. Oh, we know nothing, and the sea heats away the ground we stand on. That was his fate, his gift, but having thrown away, when he dismounted, all gesture and fripperies, all trophies of nuts and rows, and shrunk so that not only fame, but even his own name was forgotten by him. He kept even in that desolation a vigilance which spared no phantom and luxuriated in no vision, and it was in this guise that he inspired in William Banks intermittently and in Charles Tansley obsequiously, and in his wife now. When she looked up and saw him standing at the edge of the lawn, profound reverence and pity and gratitude too, as a stake driven into the bed of a channel upon which the gull perch and the waves beat inspire in merry boat loads a feeling of gratitude for the duty it has taken upon itself of marking the channel out there in the floods alone. That's a fucking sentence. But the father of 8 children had no choice, muttering half aloud, so he broke off, turned, sighed, right, raised his eyes, saw the figure of his wife reading story to the little boy, filled his pipe. He turned from the sight of human ignorance and human fate and the sea heating the ground we stand on, which had he been able to contemplate it fixedly, might have led to something, and found consolation in trifles so slight compared with the august theme just know before him that he was disposed to slur that comfort over, to deprecate it, as if to be caught happy in a world of misery was for an honest man the most despicable of crimes. Sorry. It was true, he was for the most part happy. He had his wife, he had his children, had promised in 6 weeks' time to talk some nonsense to the young men of Cardiff about Locke, Hume, Berkeley, and the causes of the French Revolution. But this and his pleasure in it, in the phrases he made, in the ardor of youth, in his wife's beauty, in the tributes that reached him from Swansea, Cardiff, Exeter, Southampton, Kidderminster, Oxford, Cambridge, all had to be deprecated and concealed under the phrase talking nonsense, because in effect he had not done the thing he might have done. It was a disguise, it was a refuge of a man afraid to own his own feelings, who could not say, "This is what I like, this is what I am," and rather pitiable and distasteful to William Banks's and Lily Briscoe, wondered why such concealment should be necessary, why he needed always praise, why so brave a man in thought should be so timid in life. How strangely he was venerable and laughable at one and the same time. Teaching and preaching is beyond human power, Lily suspected. She was putting away her things. If you are exalted, you must somehow come a cropper, and Mrs. Ramsay gave him what he asked too easily. Then the change must be so upsetting, Lily said. He comes in from his books and finds us all playing games and talking nonsense. Imagine what a change from the things he thinks about, she said. He was bearing down upon them. Now he stopped dead and stood looking in silence at the sea. Now he had turned away again. And this is going to be it for today. Funny, like the bunch of contradictory thoughts that he passes through. Obviously, I disagree with most of it, but I understand where it comes from. And sometimes you have like these thoughts about, like we still have, like the capitalist system we have today is still work with a similar mindset as the one as the slaves. And the question is worth asking, if it wasn't for the slave, would I have this webcam and would I have this computer screen and all that stuff? And my answer to that is probably yes. we probably would have less stuff, but I think we underestimate how much work we would still do if we didn't have the obligation to work and we didn't use underpaid labor to make our things. We would probably have less things, but we would have still cool things like a computer screen, and I would probably still be making video games. Maybe there would be less, but whatever. Anyway, food for thought. I'm gonna let you. I was thinking about going away with a song from Spelling. I was talking with Aldous Harding last time about like weirdos being honest weirdos, and I think Spelling is also one of them. That is that you're gonna see the video. There are a bunch of hippie weirdos. It looks like a bunch of hippie weirdos, but I'm like, you're having fun. And it's cool seeing people having fun, especially in this dark time. Having fun, like when we read To the Lighthouse from Virgin Woolf. I hope you liked it. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed what I do. I hope I'm going to talk more about my video game soon. And I hope I'm going to talk about my surgeries too soon, because I'm supposed to have some. And I'll continue. See you next time.